Imagine waking up to breaking news. The United States has launched massive airstrikes inside Iran. Within minutes, missiles start flying across the Middle East. Oil prices explode. Global markets crash. And the world begins asking one terrifying question. Is this the start of World War III? A war between the United States and Iran wouldn't just be another regional conflict. It could reshape global power, destabilize the Middle East, and send shockwaves through the global economy. And here's the twist. Even if the US wins militarily, everyone might still lose. So in this video, we're going to break down exactly what would happen hour by hour if the US and Iran went to war. From the first missile strikes to cyber warfare, to the global economic fallout. Let's begin. Every modern war starts with one thing: air power. If the US launched a war against Iran, the opening move would almost certainly be a massive surprise air campaign. Stealth bombers like the B-2 Spirit, F-35 fighters, and cruise missiles from submarines would target Iran's most critical military sites. These include nuclear facilities, missile launch sites, air defense systems, command centers, Revolutionary Guard bases. In previous operations, the US has used bunker-buster bombs capable of penetrating hundreds of feet underground to strike hardened nuclear facilities. Within the first hour, hundreds of precision missiles could hit targets across Iran. The goal? Destroy Iran's ability to respond before it even knows what's happening. But Iran has spent decades preparing for exactly this moment. Within hours, Iran would launch its retaliation. Unlike the US, Iran cannot match American air power. So instead, Iran relies on asymmetric warfare. This includes ballistic missiles, swarms of drones, fast attack boats, proxy militias across the Middle East. Missiles could target US bases in Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. We've seen Iran launch massive missile strikes before. In 2020, Iran fired more than a dozen ballistic missiles at US bases in Iraq in response to the killing of General Qasem Soleimani. Now imagine that attack multiplied by 10. At the same time, Iranian-backed groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis could launch attacks against American allies. The war would instantly spread across the entire region. Then Iran would deploy one of its most powerful weapons, the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway carries about 20% of the world's oil supply. Iran could shut it down using naval mines, missile batteries, drone attacks on tankers. Even the threat of closure could cause massive disruption. Shipping traffic could stop almost overnight. In fact, during recent tensions, tanker traffic in the region dropped dramatically as companies feared attacks. Oil prices would skyrocket. Global markets could panic. And suddenly, a war in the Middle East becomes everyone's problem. By the end of the first day, the conflict would escalate dramatically. The United States would likely deploy multiple carrier strike groups in the Persian Gulf and Arabian Sea. Each carrier brings dozens of fighter jets, missile destroyers, advanced radar systems, electronic warfare aircraft. These forces would begin a relentless bombing campaign. Targets would include military bases, drone factories, missile storage, FACILITIES Revolutionary Guard headquarters. The goal would be simple: cripple Iran's military infrastructure. Reports from recent conflicts suggest that thousands of strikes can occur in just days as the US attempts to degrade Iran's military capabilities. But Iran has a strategy. It doesn't need to defeat the US military. It only needs to make the war painful enough to force America to stop. This is where things get dangerous. Iran doesn't fight alone. Across the Middle East, it has built a network of powerful allies and militias. These include Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shiite militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, militias in Syria. If war breaks out, these groups could launch attacks across the entire region. Missiles could hit Israeli cities, Gulf oil infrastructure, US military bases. Suddenly, the conflict becomes a multi-front war stretching from Lebanon to the Persian Gulf. Experts warn that these proxy forces are a key part of Iran's strategy to expand the battlefield and increase costs for the United States. And that's when the risk of regional war becomes very real. But the battlefield isn't just physical, it's digital. Iran has invested heavily in cyber warfare. During a major conflict, cyber attacks could target US power grids, banking systems, government networks, energy infrastructure. Meanwhile, the United States would launch its own cyber offensive, targeting Iranian communications, military systems, and financial networks. The result? A silent war in cyberspace happening at the same time as missiles and bombs. And civilians thousands of miles away could feel the effects. By the second week of war, the global consequences would become impossible to ignore. Remember the Strait of Hormuz? If it stays closed, the world could face one of the largest energy shocks in history. Oil prices could surge past $100 per barrel or higher, triggering economic panic. Countries that depend on Middle Eastern oil would feel the pressure immediately. Stock markets could crash, inflation could surge worldwide. Even countries far from the conflict would suffer. This is why many analysts believe a US-Iran war would become a global economic crisis. So, if war happens, who wins? Militarily, the United States would likely dominate. America's military budget, technology, and global alliances give it overwhelming advantages. The US Air Force and Navy could destroy large parts of Iran's conventional military. But winning a war isn't the same as winning the aftermath. Iran's strategy focuses on survival and disruption. By attacking shipping lanes, proxy wars, and the global economy, Iran could make the cost of war extremely high. Even analysts say the likely outcome of a conflict would be a limited war lasting days or weeks rather than a full invasion. Because the longer the war lasts, the more everyone loses. A war between the United States and Iran wouldn't look like the wars of the past. It would be fast. It would be technological, and it would impact the entire world. Missiles would fly. Cyber attacks would spread. Oil markets would collapse. And millions of people would feel the consequences. The real question isn't just who would win. It's whether anyone could truly win at all.